If you've ever heard anyone talk about wearing a tinfoil hat to block out electromagnetic waves, you might have rolled your eyes and dismissed it as a conspiracy theory. But what if I told you they might actually have a point? As you may know, living in the modern world pretty much guarantees exposure to a whole host of electromagnetic waves across the spectrum. Almost all of our technology is connected using electromagnetic signals, from radio waves to Bluetooth to microwaves and Wi-Fi. All of these signals are essentially light waves at different wavelengths, or photons at different energy levels. The energy levels of photons used for signalling are lower than that of visible light. Only when light gets up to the ultraviolet, X-ray and gamma ray wavelengths do we start to worry about ionizing effects. This is where atoms absorb photons, increasing the energy level of the atom to the point where electrons are stripped off, making the said atom reactive. And if this happens to the atoms in your DNA, it can slice up your genome and increase the incidence of mutations, and as a result, cause cancers. Not fun. For this reason, we don't use ionizing radiation to send signals. So the prevailing consensus is that as long as we use light waves with a longer wavelength than visible light, radio waves, infrared, microwaves, then our atoms, and therefore our DNA, cells and tissues, cannot be impacted by them. Well, not exactly. The thing is, different atoms and molecules absorb photons of all different wavelengths, not just those from ionizing radiation. Okay, when they absorb lower energy photons, they don't lose their electrons, but this change in the energy state can cause the release of lower energy photon, say one in the infrared region of the spectrum. This is kind of how a microwave oven works. The microwaves are absorbed by water molecules in the food. This increases their energy level, causing the molecules to then emit infrared photons that warm the food. So, although microwaves are not ionizing, a large dose of these photons could make you feel quite toasty in a jiffy. Another way that electromagnetic waves have been hypothesized to affect our biology is through the use of tiny antennas. Antennas made up of our own DNA. Now, antennas are used in electronics to pick up signals from specific electromagnetic waves. They're made with precise dimensions and use exact materials that absorb the signal of choice, which converts them to a decipherable current that can be translated into whatever information that you're sending. Man-made antennae are specifically designed to do this, and the electrical components within a given machine tend to be shielded in metal cases that act as Faraday cages, protecting them against other signals. Now, other methods include filtering signals or grounding circuits to prevent damage, or power surges that can be caused by strong electromagnetic signals. So, we acknowledge that signals can be destructive in machines. So, what about our biological machinery? The thing is, DNA doesn't have protective mechanisms against electromagnetic radiation. Why would it? Life evolved in the absence of these electromagnetic frequencies that are present in the modern world. Yes, of course, radiation from the fusion reactor in the sky and other incidental cosmic signals will have been present. But with the Earth's magnetosphere deflecting a lot of the signals, electromagnetic radiation on the lower energy levels just wouldn't have acted as a selection pressure, and therefore wouldn't have guided the evolution of the structure of DNA. Whereas today, the incessant bombardment by frequencies used for communication could be negatively impacting these complex microstructures within our cells. You see, DNA is packaged in a myriad of ways, which turns out is very important. In fact, it's intrinsic to the function of the epigenome, the higher order organisation of our genome. This is where the expression of genes is regulated through the accessibility of distinct parts of the genome. Now, the trouble is, these countless 3D conformations seemingly act as antennae, and absorption of electromagnetic signals might spell trouble for gene regulation, among other things. A paper written in 2010 by Martin Blank and Reba Goodman, titled "DNA is a Fractal Antenna in Electromagnetic Fields," describes how DNA seemingly interact with non-ionizing electromagnetic radiation, even in very low energy radio frequency range, and even the ELF, or extremely low frequency range. They conclude that the wide frequency range of interaction with EMF is a functional characteristic of a fractal antenna, and DNA appears to possess the two structural characteristics of fractal antennas: electronic conduction and self-symmetry. Now, these properties contribute to the greater reactivity of DNA with EMF in the environment, and this DNA damage could potentially account for increases in cancer epidemiology, as well as the variations in the rate of chemical evolution in early geological history. Now, That doesn't sound too good. So basically, the fact is, we might be filled to the brim with fractal antennas perfectly suited to absorb the billions of signals that have become so pervasive and instrumental to the function of our modern society. Great. Now, we can't directly pin the increased cancer rate or an increase in certain diseases directly to this, because there are too many confounding factors, such as poor diet, lack of exercise and stress, and that will likely contribute to the prevalence of these ailments. Although, this video does talk about a study that describes how the impact of mobile phone use may be reducing the sperm count. Nevertheless, one complaint that has come to the fore is a condition known as Electromagnetic Hypersensitivity Syndrome, or EHS. Electromagnetic hypersensitivity, also known as microwave syndrome, is a relatively new clinical condition. It's characterised by a variety of non-specific symptoms that occur after exposure to electromagnetic fields, or EMF, in our environment. Now, I know this sounds like science fiction or the result of a psychological issue, but there's a growing body of research that suggests it's a very real phenomenon, and it's becoming more and more common. Studies have shown that even at extremely low intensities, EMF can have biological effects at a cellular level. These effects include changes in calcium signaling, which is intrinsic to a multitude of cellular processes from growth to programmed cell death. Also, there appears to be an activation of free radical processes and the overproduction of reactive oxygen species in living cells. Now, whether this is a result of signals being absorbed by DNA, altering gene regulation, or simply by causing atoms within our cells to have altered reactivity is neither here nor there, to be honest. Irrespective of the mechanism, it appears that our cells seem to get stressed out by EMF exposure, leading to a cascade of potential health issues. Now, this is amplified in people with electromagnetic hypersensitivity syndrome, as they are thought to have impaired detoxification systems, which means their bodies struggle to deal with the oxidative stress. In these individuals, exposure to EMF leads to symptoms in various parts of the body, including the central nervous system, the cardiovascular system, the skin and immune system. Some people might experience headaches, dizziness, fatigue, or even more severe neurological and cognitive disruptions. One particularly interesting aspect of EHS is how it can affect the brain. Magnetite crystals, chunks of iron oxide, can be absorbed from the polluted air through inhalation and potentially provide another mechanism that explains how EMF could impact our brains. Additionally, EMF exposure has also been linked to changes in the blood-brain barrier, which could lead to a whole host of neurological symptoms. And it's not just our brain that's at risk. EMF can affect the autonomic nervous system, which controls involuntary functions like your heartbeat and digestion. So sufferers of electromagnetic hypersensitivity syndrome can notice cardiovascular symptoms or changes in skin and blood function. It's a wide-reaching problem that seems to affect many parts of the body. Luckily, the scientific community is starting to acknowledge the symptoms of EHS, and they acknowledge that they could be biologically plausible, meaning that there's a real basis for these reactions. However, more research and better diagnostic tests are needed to fully understand and validate EHS. So, what's the takeaway here? Well, maybe those tinfoil hat wearers weren't entirely off the mark. With the spread of wireless networks, we're all being exposed to more and more EMF than ever before. It might be time to rethink our exposure limits and consider safer, wide alternatives to protect those who are particularly susceptible. To be honest, it seems likely that the dense concentration of signals that we encounter every day will have an impact on us all to varying degrees. But I seriously doubt that we'll be switching them off completely anytime soon. And although aluminium foil is actually pretty good at deflecting those electromagnetic waves, I'm fairly sure that a hat alone isn't going to give you much protection. Maybe a suit of armour, or converting your house into a giant Faraday cage. The reality is the effects of EMF will be borne out in the coming years. Hopefully it turns out to be innocuous and generally safe. We really don't want to look back on this era of rampant EMF use in the same way that we now view the use of leaded petrol or asbestos, CFCs, thalidomide, DDT, PCBs. We do have form for this kind of thing. Doesn't fill you with much confidence, does it? Anyway, thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting, please commit some EMF signals to help out the channel. So hit like and or subscribe. It really helps us to grow. And remember, sometimes conspiracy theories can have a kernel of truth. See you next time.